Hello, nighttime explorers of the boring testament. Welcome aboard for another journey through the sometimes murky waters of sacred narratives. Today, folks, we're hoisting the sails and diving headfirst into one of the most well-known, most repeated, and perhaps most unsettlingly accepted stories of all time. Yes, brace your hearts and minds. We're going to dissect the Great Flood. Think it's just about Noah, a giant boat, and a bunch of cute animals? Oh, just wait. The tide of details we'll surface tonight might shake some assumptions and, who knows, drown a bit of naivete. But before the heavens open up around here, a small invitation. Hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy our sleepy yet thought-provoking tales from the boring testament. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it in your part of the world? It's always fascinating to see who's joining us on this nighttime drift through time and scripture. Now then, pull that favorite blanket up to your chin, adjust your headphones just right, maybe cover your eyes with a sleep mask, and let's set sail for a world that was, shall we say, in dire need of a deep clean. According to the Bible, humanity had gone off the rails, wickedness running wild, corruption on every corner. Things were so bad that God looked at the whole mess and thought, you know what? Cutral Psalpstel, this civilizational experiment. Let's reboot from scratch. Harsh? Definitely, but who are we to question a divine system reset on a planetary scale? Genesis chapter 6 paints a grim picture. It says, "The wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." That's quite the statement, isn't it? Every thought, only evil, continually. Seems the Humanity Project had a serious bug in the code. And things get even weirder. The text mentions the Nephilim, giants who walked the earth back then, apparently the offspring of sons of God and daughters of men. A curious genetic experiment, according to some interpretations, that contributed to the global moral meltdown. Giants. Suddenly, God's urge to rethink the whole thing doesn't seem so far-fetched. Now here's a question that hits hard. Was everyone corrupt? Every last soul, except Noah and his family? Were babies inherently evil? Kids secretly plotting chaos? That's quite the blanket statement. The text even says, "The Lord regretted having made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart." Oof, that's weighty, the Creator mourning his own creation. Like an artist staring at a painting and deciding it needs a total redo. And then comes the announcement, as calm as divine thunder can be, "I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground. For I regret that I have made them." Yep, everything's going. Animals, birds, reptiles, the whole ecosystem. A hard reset, no backups. And here we are, in our late night quiet, just taking in the scale of this cosmic decision. But, as in any reboot worth watching, there's an exception. A single man. Genesis 6:8. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. A spark of hope, or maybe the beginning of one seriously heavy responsibility. Being the chosen one in a mass extinction plan isn't exactly a vacation. So, who was this Noah? The lone approved soul in a condemned world? The text calls him a righteous man, blameless among his generation. Noah walked with God, father of three, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Not a bad resume for the soon-to-be captain of Earth's first floating zoo and future patriarch of rebooted mankind. Picture him, maybe a quiet guy, minding his own life. When he gets the divine DM, Noah, I've got a job for you. Just build a massive ark because the world's about to be flooded, specs incoming. That must have been quite the inbox moment. Or maybe, by walking with God, he was already used to epic missions. The instructions are detailed, practically a DIY ark for a New World manual. Wood? Go for wood, whatever that was, but apparently strong enough to handle a planetary bath. Compartments, 3 decks, side door, roof vent. Dimensions, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high, roughly 150 meters long. That's a football field and a half, folks. Imagine the scene. Noah and his sons, and maybe some skeptical helpers, starting this monumental build. And the tools, materials, labor force? You might fairly ask. The text is silent. Apparently, faith not only moves mountains, but also builds massive ships. What mattered is that God gave the order, and Noah got to work. Oh, and don't forget the pitch. Inside and out, tarred for waterproofing. Divine Shipbuilding 101. As Noah toiled, no doubt under the confused or mocking gaze of his neighbors. Look, it's Noah, building a boat on dry land. Lost it, has he? The countdown to the great transformation had already begun. The irony here is delicious, isn't it? The only man called righteous, working on something absurd to everyone else, while the rest of the world partied through the final days. And here we are, late at night, quietly wondering, what kind of justice chooses one man for preservation and lets the rest slide into oblivion? Was Noah chosen only because he was good, or also because he was the only one who would actually build the thing? And his family, did they qualify by merit or just lucky family ties? These are the questions tradition often skips. But here on the Boring Testament, we like to bring out the magnifying glass of curiosity, because trying to understand the divine, or at least the stories about it, also means reflecting on its, let's say, rather unique casting decisions. And so, while Noah, our divinely appointed protagonist, followed the blueprints for an unprecedented feat of naval architecture, the world outside, in its vast majority, remained blissfully unaware of the ongoing planetary reboot. The ark took shape, a massive, silent monument to a singular faith. But the construction was merely the prelude to an even more exotic logistical challenge. The time had come to fill that gopher wood colossus with the future and only representatives of terrestrial life. God's instructions, as always, were specific, like a sacred inventory for survival. Of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Clear enough. But as with any divine contract, there was a celestial footnote. From the clean animals, and also the birds of the sky, 7 pairs were required. From the unclean ones, just a single pair would suffice. This distinction, made long before dietary or ritual laws were formally introduced, invites some late-night reflection. What were the criteria for this primordial purity? A foreshadowing of future religious practices, or perhaps divine preferences for post-flood barbecues and ceremonial offerings. Bring 7 pairs of sheep, soft, gentle, and practical. But pigs, just a couple will do. A zoological curation with long-term implications. And the logistics? Oh, let your imagination wade in. Noah and his family, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with their wives, suddenly found themselves cast as organizers of the largest animal migration in history. How to identify each species, how to attract, or rather, welcome, 2 of every creature, from mighty lions and tigers to elusive rodents. What about animals from lands unimaginably far away by the standards of that time? Did penguins waddle in from the poles? Kangaroos bounce from the outback? The biblical text, with its signature serenity in skipping over such practicalities, simply states, they came to Noah, 2 by 2, a spontaneous, divinely orchestrated convergence, certainly sparing Noah an intercontinental safari of epic proportions. It's like a celestial express delivery of the world's fauna straight to his shipyard. Efficient, to say the least. Picture the scene. Night explorers, a heterogeneous procession, from the tiniest insect to the mightiest pachyderm, approaching that colossal wooden vessel, giraffes, regal and tall, perhaps requiring extra care to enter the ark. Elephants, deliberate and heavy-footed, testing the deck's strength, and the sloths, slowly but surely, arriving just in time for final boarding. A biodiversity parade, a microcosm of creation ready to be preserved. And oh, what a soundtrack. Cooing doves, muffled roars, hoofbeats, and claws on wood, a symphony of survival, echoing in the calm before the storm. At last, the big boarding day arrives. Genesis chapter 7 tells us Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters began to cover the earth. 6 centuries of life, culminating in a starring role in a planetary survival drama. Into the ark go Noah, his sons, his wife, and their wives, and with them, every air-breathing life form, each tucked into its designated compartment, waiting for the unknown. And then, a detail told, with a simplicity that deepens its solemnity. And the Lord shut him in, the ark's door. It wasn't Noah who locked it from within, like a captain bracing for impact. It was God himself who sealed the vessel, a divine final gesture separating the inside, the sanctuary of chosen life, from the outside, a world about to be submerged. Out there, life carried on, many perhaps still unaware that their time had run out. The Bible says they waited 7 days inside the ark before the deluge began, 7 days adrift in anticipation, surrounded by the elite representatives of the animal kingdom and the last ember of pre-flood humanity. What passed in those 7 days? The tension of waiting, the silence before chaos, glances exchanged among Noah's family. Dad, are we sure the sky's really going to fall? And the animals, with their primal instincts, perhaps sensing the impending upheaval, growing restless, 7 days of calm so heavy it almost thundered, an eerie prelude to nature's fury. And then it came, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month. On that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. Not a drizzle. Dear explorers, the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven. A poetic yet powerful way to describe a cataclysm on a scale we struggle to imagine. 40 days and 40 nights of relentless downpour, a cleansing no weather app could predict. We try, in the quiet of our minds, to grasp the magnitude of this moment. The rising waters, merciless, drowning fields, valleys, cities, villages, swallowing hills, and finally, the tallest mountain peaks. The waters rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. 15 cubits above them, the water surged. A global immersion, no escape. The text is starkly clear in its closing. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. A sweeping conclusion to that era's terrestrial life, delivered with calm finality that invites profound reflection on destruction and the fragility of existence itself. And what of the creatures of the sea and rivers? How did they fare in this sudden, violent shift in their aquatic universe? Did they thrive in the newly expanded waterscape, or were they too affected by the chaotic mix of fresh and salt water, the debris and silt? The Bible, understandably, focuses on land dwellers and humanity. One can imagine that for 40 days and 40 nights, the dominant sound across the planet, aside from the rage of the elements, was the endless rain, a soundtrack to the radical transformation of Earth's face. And Noah, secure in his ark, adrift above a drowned world, a staggering responsibility for one man, the helmsman of an uncertain future, navigating a sea of questions that, even today, still ripple through us here at the Boring Testament. And so, with the outside world completely submerged and the torrential rain finally giving way after 40 days and 40 nights, Noah's Ark, that floating sanctuary of life, entered a new phase of its journey. The storm had passed, but now came the true test: endurance. Time, boredom, and the peculiar challenges of long-term coexistence in rather unique conditions. Scripture tells us the waters prevailed upon the earth for a stunning 150 days, 5 months. Pause for a moment here in the quiet of the night and picture it: 8 human beings, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, confined aboard that vast wooden vessel, adrift on a planet turned into one endless ocean. And of course, the incalculable company of a full-scale floating zoo, representing the entirety of air-breathing land life, all relying on the wisdom and organization of a single family. Life aboard, a fascinating mystery for our nighttime imagination. The Bible, in its majestic focus on essentials, does not indulge us with a ship's log or day-by-day account. How were the smells managed? With so many species sharing the same recycled air. And what of waste? How does one clean up after an elephant versus a hamster? How do you feed a hungry lion without it deciding to diversify its menu with a tastier cage mate? And what did the humans eat? Had they stockpiled enough grains and dried fruit? Or did the unclean animals start glancing nervously at the 7 pairs of the clean ones, pondering if some sort of rotating buffet had been quietly planned? These questions float in our minds while the world outside sleeps. And boredom, dear explorers, 5 months with the same watery view out the window, the same rocking of the ark, day after day. How do you stay sane? Were there improvised games, board games crafted from pebbles and bones, storytelling sessions to chase away monotony? Or perhaps it was simply the rhythmic sound of animals breathing and the groaning of wood under pressure, an eerie soundtrack for a suspended existence, a limbo between a world that was and a future yet to come. We can only imagine the tensions, family disputes over who had to clean the hippo pen that day, or the aching longing to feel solid ground again. Genesis tells us that after this long stretch, God remembered Noah and all the living things and livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters began to subside, a breath of change, sign that the aquatic trial was shifting into a new chapter. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven, once agents of cataclysm, were sealed. The rain had fully ceased, and the waters that had swallowed everything began to recede. Gradually, patiently, the earth slowly began to reveal itself once more. After 150 days, change was finally visible. Then a pivotal moment. In the 7th month, on the 17th day, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Land in sight, not quite the habitable earth we know, but a point of anchoring, a sign that the water level had dropped enough for the colossal vessel to find a place to rest. Yet the mountain tops would only become visible in the 10th month, on the 1st day. More waiting, another exercise in patience for Noah, who, at 601 years old, displayed either exceptional resilience and faith, or perhaps a quiet surrender to divine timing. After another 40 days, with the peaks now visible, Noah takes initiative. He opens the window he had built into the ark, an act of cautious exploration and hopeful curiosity. He sends out a raven, an interesting choice for the first reconnaissance flight, wouldn't you say? A bird known for endurance, intelligence, and feeding on remains, which sadly were likely abundant in the emerging landscape. The raven, we're told, flew back and forth until the waters dried up from the earth. It brought no olive branch, no signs of land, but its ability to come and go hinted that the world outside, though still wild, was no longer fully underwater. Then Noah sends a different messenger, a dove, a bird often linked with peace and gentleness. He wanted to see if the waters had truly receded from the earth, but the dove found no place to land, no resting place for the sole of her foot, and returned to him in the ark, for the waters were still over the surface of the whole earth. Noah, with gentleness, reached out his hand and took her back in. Another 7 days passed. Patience, it seems, is a virtue fundamental to planetary restoration. He sends the dove a second time, and this time she returns at evening with the awaited signal, the flicker of hope, a freshly plucked olive leaf. Vegetation had survived. The waters were truly retreating. Earth was beginning to breathe again. What a moment that must have been, holding that small, green branch, witnessing the quiet, vibrant promise of a world renewed after devastation. Noah waits 7 more days, a week thick with anticipation. The nearing end of confinement. He sends the dove out once more, and this time, she did not return to him again. The verdict was clear. There was now enough dry land, safe perches, food. The long cycle of isolation was coming to an end. And we, here at the Boring Testament, watching this millennia-old voyage unfold, are invited to reflect on these small but powerful symbols. The pragmatic raven, the persistent dove, the tender olive leaf, details that enrich this grand narrative of destruction, turning it into one of hope and rebirth, even if that rebirth came only after a planetary reset of cosmic proportions. In the end, it's nature's softest signals, a leaf, a bird, that quietly declare the end of judgment and the beginning of a new chapter for life on Earth. And so we leave Noah and his extraordinary, resilient crew at the cusp of renewal, with the image of a dove flying home to a new world, a dry, renewed world, finally within reach. And so, after the messenger dove failed to return, signaling that dry land finally offered a safe refuge, Noah, our ever-patient captain of the overcrowded ark, receives the divine green light. Genesis tells us that in the 601st year of Noah's life, on the first day of the first month, the waters had dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering of the ark and looked out, and behold, the surface of the ground was dry. What a sight that must have been, after over a year floating on a global ocean, to gaze upon bare, cleansed earth, ready for a fresh start, a moment surely filled with immense relief, and perhaps a tinge of apprehension about what lay ahead. And the divine order soon follows. Come out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and their wives with you. Bring out every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number, a heavenly all clear to repopulate the planet. Imagine the disembarkation. It couldn't have been just a casual stroll down a ramp. After so many months in confinement, animals of every kind emerge, some cautiously, others exuberantly, into a reborn world now eerily quiet. Elephants stepping onto solid ground, birds soaring into a peaceful sky, tiny rodents slipping into fresh hiding spots, and Noah and his family, the only 8 humans alive, set foot on newly exposed soil, witnesses and agents of a restoration of biblical proportions. What a weight to carry, to be the progenitors of all future humanity, while bearing the memory of a world that no longer existed. Noah's first act on dry land, according to the text, is to build an altar to the Lord, and from every clean animal and clean bird, he offers burnt sacrifices upon it, a gesture of gratitude, no doubt. But here, at the Boring Testament, we can't help but notice the quiet irony. The 7 pairs of clean animals sent to repopulate the earth abundantly are immediately reduced by a few for ceremonial purposes. Curious way to kick off a repopulation effort, one might say. but within the ritual logic of the time, it was a profound act of devotion, an acknowledgement of divine sovereignty, and that sacrifice, we're told, was received. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, a fragrance that, apparently, had a calming effect, because what follows is this declaration from God's heart: never again will I curse the ground because of mankind, even though the imagination of the human heart is evil from youth. Nor will I ever again destroy all living creatures as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. A solemn promise, a divine concession to, shall we say, humanity's persistent nature, and a guarantee that the flood option is officially off the table. Comforting news for the survivors and for all of us who enjoy dry nights. Then God blesses Noah and his sons, repeating the now familiar words: be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The original directive, reissued for a post-apocalyptic world, and along with the blessing come some new terms for living in this renewed world. Fear and dread of humans would fall upon all animals, a shift in the man-animal dynamic, and a notable addition to the diet. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I give them to you just as I gave the green plants. Yes, meat officially enters the human menu, with one important caveat. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. A rule that would echo across many future traditions. But the true highlight of this new phase is the establishment of a covenant, a pact between God, Noah, his descendants, and every living creature that was with you. The birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. A universal covenant. And what is the visible sign of this eternal promise? That there will never again be a flood to destroy all life. The rainbow. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. What a powerful image, don't you think? After the most devastating of storms, a multicolored arc appears in the sky, a constant reminder of divine promise, a natural phenomenon now infused with profound theological meaning. And we allow ourselves, in the serenity of night, to wonder, is the rainbow meant to remind us, or to remind God, that in moments of future frustration with humanity's, let's say, unpredictable civilizational experiments, he might remember his vow not to reach for such dramatic aquatic solutions again? A question to ponder while waiting for sleep to come. And so, with dry land beneath their feet, the animals scattering, and humanity reduced to a single family under a new covenant, a new chapter begins. But the complexities of human nature, and perhaps divine nature too, are far from over, as we'll discover in the next pages, or rather, the next reflections here at the Boring Testament, with the divine promise sealed by the rainbow, and the command to be fruitful and multiply, echoing across the freshly washed earth. Noah, the surviving hero of the aquatic apocalypse, rolled up his sleeves. Genesis chapter 9 tells us, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. An interesting choice for humanity's first major agricultural venture, don't you think? Not corn, not wheat for daily bread, a vineyard, maybe, after over a year surrounded by nothing but water. The idea of a good glass of wine was especially appealing, a celebration of life's return, or perhaps something to help forget the vast ocean of loss they'd just left behind. Noah, it seems, wasn't just a skilled boat builder, but also a capable vintner. Or maybe post-flood soil was absurdly fertile. In any case, he drank the wine. And here the story takes a turn into very human and rather embarrassing territory. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. Yes, night explorers, the great Noah, the righteous, blameless man chosen by God, ends up drunk and naked in his tent. Quite a departure from the previous grandeur, isn't it? A reminder, perhaps, that even the holiest among us are vulnerable to the joys and dangers of fermented grape juice. Humanity was rebooted, but clearly not debugged. What follows is one of the most debated and frankly disturbing episodes in Noah's narrative. Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons, identified as the father of Canaan, sees his father's nakedness, but instead of covering him discreetly, he goes and tells his 2 brothers outside. A bit of family gossip with catastrophic consequences, one might say. Shem and Japheth, on the other hand, show more filial decorum. They take a cloak, walk in backward, and cover their father without looking at him. A respectful gesture. When Noah wakes up from his wine and learns what his younger son had done to him, though curiously, Ham was actually the middle child, not the youngest. But textual quirks are always fair game for late-night curiosity. He doesn't respond with remorse or a hungover apology. No, he issues a curse, and not on Ham, the actual perpetrator, but on Canaan, Ham's son. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. Then he blesses Shem and Japheth, proclaiming that Canaan will serve them. Let's pause here, in the quiet stillness of night, to process this. A man gets drunk, exposes himself. His son sees him and tells his brothers, and the result is a generational curse that falls on the grandson, condemning an entire lineage to servitude. The logic here, if you'll allow the observation, seems to have stepped out for some fresh air, along with Noah's sobriety. Why curse Canaan for Ham's indiscretion? And what kind of divine justice allows such a disproportionate punishment to stand, birthed from a moment of personal embarrassment and fermented misjudgment? Tragically, this episode has been exploited throughout history to justify horrendous acts, most notably the enslavement of African peoples, through interpretations that linked Ham and his descendants to certain ethnic groups. A horribly distorted and convenient reading of an already problematic passage, and we here, at the Boring Testament, can't help but feel a calm indignation when ancient, morally complex texts like this one are repurposed for such dark and inhumane ends. So ends Noah's story, the man who walked with God, who saved life on earth, on a note not of triumph, but of wine, nakedness, and a curse that echoed for generations. A sobering reminder that humanity's restart did not come with a clean slate when it came to flaws, power dynamics and questionable judgment, and perhaps, just perhaps, a subtle nod from the biblical narrator that even the chosen ones are not immune to stumbling, and that those stumbles can unleash consequences both divinely and humanly disastrous. After these events, the text tells us Noah lived 350 years after the flood, and all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. A long life, no doubt, marked by cataclysm and by a restart already shadowed by conflict. It leaves us pondering the weight of legacy, how a single moment can shape the fate of many, and the nature of justice, whether divine or earthly. Profound questions to keep us company in the night as the world outside keeps turning, blissfully unaware of these ancient and unsettling stories that still whisper to us through the dark. Our nighttime journey through the boring testament now carries us from the receding waters of the flood and the tangled family dynamics of Noah to a new setting, the plain of Shinar. Humanity, or what was left of it, had begun to multiply again, and it seems shared a common goal. Genesis chapter 11 tells us, now the whole earth had one language and the same words, a linguistic and cultural unity that, at first glance, might seem ideal, a helpful tool for cooperation and mutual understanding. But as we'll see, under certain divine perspectives, unity can be problematic. Migrating eastward, this unified people found a plain in the land of Shinar and decided to settle there. And then came the grand idea, the project that would define an era. Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they used brick instead of stone and tar instead of mortar. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Let's pause for a moment and appreciate the ambition here. A city and a tower that reaches the heavens, an architectural and symbolic feat of, well, celestial proportions. Their stated goal? To make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered, a centralized identity, a collective monument, and perhaps just a hint of that classic human longing to touch the divine, to reach the transcendent, or at least get close enough with well-fired bricks. Their chosen technology, brick and tar, an innovation over stone, perhaps more efficient for large-scale construction on flatland. Their cooperation was absolute. Fueled by a single language, the project advanced. The tower rose, a monument to human ingenuity and unity, a beacon of progress, they might have thought, a statement that even after a divine reset, humanity was still capable of greatness. But as is often the case in stories where humanity gets a little too ambitious for heaven's taste, we receive a divine inspection. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. A divine descent to check on the construction, and the review, it seems, wasn't exactly glowing. God observes and concludes, behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing they propose will now be impossible for them. A statement that, in the stillness of our nightly reflection, sounds almost like concern, alarm. The Almighty, who created galaxies with a word, now watches humans building a tower and sees in it unlimited potential? The irony is gentle, but it's there. The creature, newly unified and ambitious, was perhaps getting a little too independent. So what's the divine response to this surplus of initiative? A plan for linguistic sabotage. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other. A direct intervention, not to destroy the tower with fire or unleash another flood. Remember the rainbow contract, but to strike at the root of cooperation itself, communication. And so it was done. The Lord scattered them from there over the face of all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them over the face of the earth. End of project. The great tower, symbol of unity and ambition, becomes a monument to confusion and forced dispersion. And here we sit in the silence of the night and ask ourselves, was this human unity truly a threat to the divine plan? Or was it the desire to make a name for themselves that rang as arrogance in divine ears? And isn't it a little ironic that the same God who commanded, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth," then intervenes when humanity, rather than scattering immediately, first tries to build a center of collective identity? There seems to be a scheduling conflict in the rollout of that dispersal directive. The Tower of Babel is often interpreted as a lesson against human pride, against trying to reach God by our own means, and surely that theme is present. But under our boring Testament magnifying glass, we can also read it as a story about fear of unified power, about the use of confusion as a control mechanism, and about linguistic and cultural diversity as a side effect, perhaps unintentionally beneficial, of a divinely enforced decentralization. What an interesting paradox, isn't it? To prevent concentration, they were forced into diversity, and that diversity, which we now celebrate, or at least should, was born from an act of deliberate confusion, from a breakdown in mutual understanding, a profound reflection to rock us gently toward sleep. How order and disorder, unity and fragmentation, so often dance a complex waltz in the ancient stories that shape our understanding of humanity and of the divine. From the plain of Shinar, where human ambition met its linguistic match from above, our nightly tale at the boring Testament shifts its focus. Humanity, now fractured into a mosaic of languages and clans, spread across the face of the earth, each group seeking its own path, its own name. And in this freshly forged diversity, the great celestial camera zooms in, not on the entirety of civilization this time, but on a single individual, the starting point for a new and intricate chapter in the divine human drama. That individual is Abram, son of Terah, a Semite descended from Noah through Shem. Genesis tells us his family came from Ur of the Chaldeans, an ancient and sophisticated city in Mesopotamia. From there, they migrated to Haran, where Terah, Abram's father, eventually died. And it is in Haran, with Abram now 75 years old, married to Sarai, who was, rather notably, barren, that he receives one of those divine summons that don't come with a polite opt-out option or advance notice. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Just like that, a direct, almost casual command for a middle-aged man to abandon absolutely everything: his homeland, his family ties, his comfort zone, his entire life's story thus far, in exchange for a land that God would show him, a kind of celestial blind date. No maps, no coordinates, no 5 stars on Divine Advisor. Just go, and I'll fill you in along the way. A life offer requiring either radical detachment or a faith that borders on a cosmic gamble. And the promises attached to this existential eviction notice? Oh, they are grand, borderline overwhelming for an aging nomad with no children. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Wow. Suddenly, Abram isn't just a desert wanderer. He's the linchpin in a divine plan to bless all the families of the earth. Quite the responsibility to lay on the shoulders of a man who still has no idea where he's headed. And what does Abram do in the face of this vague yet cosmic mission? So, Abram went as the Lord had told him. No recorded objections, no questions about the itinerary, no clarifications on how one becomes a great nation with 0 heirs. He simply packs up, takes Sarai, his wife, Lot, his nephew, who seems to tag along by default, all their possessions, and the people they'd gathered in Haran, and sets out to go to the land of Canaan. And they arrived there. And upon arrival at the so-called Promised Land, what do they find? An uninhabited paradise awaiting them? Not exactly. Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem, to the Oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Ah yes, a minor detail. The land was already occupied. The Canaanites. A fact that plants, even in the most patient night reader, the seed of future conflict and uneasy questions about divine promises and ownership rights. But for now, Abram builds an altar to the Lord, who appears to him. Then he moves on, pitches his tent in the hill country, builds another altar, and calls on the name of the Lord, a sacred tourist, staking spiritual claims. But life in the Promised Land doesn't begin with milk and honey. Genesis 12:10. Now there was a famine in the land. Famine. Right in the land God had shown him. An irony surely not lost on Abram, despite his great faith and the divinely guided patriarch's solution. He heads to Egypt to live there for a while, for the famine was severe in the land. A pragmatic move, no doubt. After all, faith doesn't put food on the table, at least not in this particular moment. And here, on the descent into Egypt, the narrative gives us one of those eyebrow-raising episodes that makes us pause, calmly, of course. Fearing for his life because of Sarai's beauty, Abram devises a clever plan. He tells Sarai, "Please say you are my sister, so that it will go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake." Yes, God's chosen one, the future father of a great nation, the man through whom all families would be blessed, suggests that his wife lie about their marriage to protect him. a survival tactic that puts Sarai in a rather precarious situation, to say the least. And just as Abram foresaw, Sarai is noticed by the Egyptians and taken into Pharaoh's house. And Abram? He treated Abram well for her sake. And Abram acquired sheep and cattle, donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. Instant prosperity, built on a half-truth that leans heavily toward full-on deception, with divine silence, watching from above, offering no immediate correction. But Abram's plan comes with divine side effects. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Take note of the irony. Pharaoh and his household are punished for a situation in which they were deceived, while Abram, the schemer, walks away richer, a divine justice system that invites reflection. Pharaoh, upon learning the truth, not from God, but after dealing with the plagues, confronts Abram and sends him away, along with Sarai and all he had gained. And so, Abram departs from Egypt, wealthier than he arrived, after an episode of fear, human cunning, divine inaction, and third-party punishment. A curious little adventure that leaves us pondering the winding paths of heavenly plans and the tangled morality often surrounding the so-called chosen ones. A rich feast for our nightly contemplations here at the Boring Testament. We last left our patriarch Abram departing Egypt, not empty-handed, mind you. Genesis chapter 13 tells us Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all he had, and Lot with him toward the Negev. And Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. A considerable wealth, acquired, let us recall, under diplomatically flexible circumstances involving Sarai's beauty and Pharaoh's rather coerced generosity. It seems that divine paths to prosperity occasionally pass through ethically creative detours. This newfound wealth, however, soon brought its own problems. Abram and his nephew Lot, who had followed him from Haran, had so many flocks, herds, and tents that the land could not support them while they stayed together. Yes, the classic rich man's problem. Too many possessions causing friction. Disputes broke out between the herders of Abram's livestock and those of Lot. And just to spice things up, the text reminds us the Canaanites and Perizzites were living in the land at that time. In other words, real estate was already tight. Abram, demonstrating either wisdom or weariness with domestic squabbles, proposes an amicable separation. Let there be no strife between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part ways. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. A generous offer, giving Lot the first pick. And Lot, lifting his eyes, saw the whole plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, a lush and promising landscape. And Lot chooses all the fertile plain, journeying east and settling as far as Sodom. Yes, that's Sodom. Even a casual reader of Scripture hears the alarm bells. A scenic, but questionable choice in neighborhood. But hey, who are we to critique Lot's taste in views and moral risk-taking? After Lot departs, leaving Abram with more space, but perhaps more solitude. The Lord speaks again. The promise is renewed, this time even grander. Lift your eyes and look from where you are, north, south, east, and west. For all the land you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your descendants like the dust of the earth. If anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. A promise of eternal possession and innumerable progeny made to a man who, we must note, still had no child with Sarai. Abram's patience and ours is once again tested. God then tells him, "Arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." And Abram obeys, moving his tents to the oaks of Mamre in Hebron, where he builds yet another altar to the Lord, a pilgrim of faith, staking sacred claims with stone and devotion. But peace in Hebron is short-lived. Genesis 14 drops us into a regional conflict of epic proportions. 4 kings from the east, including one king, Chedorlaomer of Elam, apparently the ringleader, go to war against 5 kings from the cities of the plain, including the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, a war over power and tribute that ends badly for the cities of the plain. They are defeated, and the victors plunder Sodom and Gomorrah, taking all the goods, food, and most notably, Lot, Abram's nephew, and his possessions since he was living in Sodom. Yes, Lot's lush but risky real estate decision now comes at a steep cost. When a fugitive brings word to Abram the Hebrew, our patriarch doesn't hesitate. He musters 318 trained men born in his household and pursues the kings as far as Dan. And here we see a different Abram. The one who once feared for his life in Egypt now appears as a military leader, the commander of a small private army capable of taking on royal coalitions. He divides his forces by night, attacks, and pursues the fleeing kings, recovering all the goods, and, most importantly, rescuing Lot, his family, and all who were taken. A successful rescue mission that reveals a side of Abram we often forget, the warrior, and there's subtle irony in the fact that the wealth which first caused the rift between him and Lot now funds the means to bring him back. Returning victorious, Abram encounters 2 key figures. First, the king of Sodom comes out to greet him, but before him arrives someone even more enigmatic. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God, Most High. Melchizedek, a name that echoes with mystery. King of Salem, often identified with future Jerusalem, and priest of the Most High God, the same God Abram follows. He blesses Abram in the name of this God, and Abram, in response, gave him 1/10 of everything. Who is this Melchizedek, who appears and vanishes with such solemn weight, absent the detailed genealogy so beloved by biblical scribes, a priest-king from an unknown order, a worshipper of the true God, who comes to bless the chosen one and receive his tithe, a figure that theologians and mystics would ponder for centuries. Was he a pre-incarnate Christ, as some traditions suggest, or a representative of an older, broader monotheism, of which Abram was only one expression? The text offers no clear answers, only a glimpse of a wider and more mysterious spiritual order. And so Abram returns, not only wealthier, with his family safe, but honored by kings and blessed by a priest of the Most High. His journey, begun with a divine call to leave everything behind, continues to unfold in unexpected ways, weaving together faith, fear, human conflict, divine silence, and cryptic encounters that keep us here at the Boring Testament, reflecting on the beautifully tangled paths of sacred history. After the dust of battle had settled and the enigmatic Melchizedek vanished from the narrative as suddenly as he appeared, Abram, our protagonist in the Boring Testament, is once again visited by the word of the Lord. Genesis chapter 15 presents one of the most vivid and frankly cinematically dark episodes of the entire patriarchal saga, the formalization of the covenant, known as the covenant of the pieces. It begins with what seems like a crisis of faith, or at least a very understandable anxiety. Despite the grand promises of descendants as numerous as the stars, Abram still has no child. Lord God, what will you give me? He asks, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus. Indeed, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. A palpable angst. The promise is grand, but time drags on, and the biological reality of an aging childless couple begins to weigh heavily. God, with his usual calm assurance, reaffirms the promise. Eliezer will not be the heir, but one who shall come from your own body. And to strengthen the point, he takes Abram outside and says, look now toward the heavens and count the stars. If you are able to number them, so shall your descendants be. And the text tells us, and he believed the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness, faith, despite impossibility, clinging to a promise. But Abram, perhaps needing something more tangible, asks, Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it, the land? And here, things get interesting and ritualistically intense. God instructs Abram to bring a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Abram gathers them, and in keeping with an ancient and viscerally symbolic covenant ritual, cut them in two and laid each half opposite the other. But he did not cut the birds. Picture the scene, night explorers, the animals divided, a corridor of flesh and blood laid out on the ground, and as the sun sets, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, a horror of great darkness fell upon him, a foreboding atmosphere, thick with mystery, and in that darkness, God reveals the fate of Abram's descendants. They will be strangers in a land not theirs, oppressed for 400 years, before they are liberated with great wealth, and finally receive the promised land, a long-term promise, complete with an extended layover in slavery, and then the climax of the covenant. And it came to pass, when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. That very day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. The divine presence, symbolized by smoke and fire, passes between the pieces, sealing the pact in solemn and rather terrifying fashion, a covenant of blood, where God himself binds his word though not without first foreshadowing generations of suffering. The irony here? To guarantee land and a nation, one must first walk through darkness, a flame at the end of a very, very long tunnel. Time moves on, and the promised child has yet to appear. Sarai, now at an age where biology seems less and less cooperative, decides it's time to help the plan along. A common cultural practice at the time, but for us late-night reflective readers, it raises all kinds of questions about female agency, cultural customs, and the consequences of helping the divine. She tells Abram, "See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her." The maid is Hagar, the Egyptian, and Abram, our patriarch, listened to the voice of Sarai. No recorded hesitation, no questions about whether this aligns with God's original intent for a child from his own body, or perhaps Sarai's too. Hagar conceives, and, as is the case with most human dramas, even those wrapped in divine intent, things get messy. When she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Fertility pride clashes with barrenness, bitterness. Sarai, wounded and furious, blames Abram. "May the wrong done to me be upon you. May the Lord judge between me and you." Abram, displaying passive leadership, replies, "Your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please." A patriarchal handwash that leaves Hagar exposed to Sarai's resentment. And so, Sarai mistreats Hagar so severely that she flees into the wilderness, alone, pregnant, and desperate. There, by a spring of water, the angel of the Lord finds her, a rare and powerful moment, divine compassion directed not at the primary family line, but at an Egyptian servant and her unborn child. The angel instructs her to return and submit, but also offers a promise, her child, to be named Ishmael, God hears, will be the father of a great multitude. Ishmael, the angel says, will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. A prophecy of tension and restlessness, a complex future for a child born of a human solution to a divine promise. Hagar returns, gives birth to Ishmael. Abram is 86 years old, a son at last. But is he the promised son? The narrative leaves us in suspense, with the feeling that the road to divine fulfillment is often paved with pain, injustice, and not so noble human improvisations. And here in the boring testament, we're left wondering, was this helping hand part of the plan all along, or just a detour that would complicate things further? Questions that echo in the stillness of the night as we await the next chapters in this tangled family and divine saga. After the birth of Ishmael, fruit of that all-too-human arrangement between Abram, Sarai, and Hagar, the biblical narrative gives us a time skip. 13 years pass. Abram is now 99 years old, an age when most people would be thinking about writing wills and taking it easy. But for Abram, the man chosen to become father of multitudes, the divine drama is far from over. In fact, it's about to get an identity upgrade and a very physical sign of belonging. Genesis chapter 17 tells us that the Lord appeared again to Abram and, introducing himself as God Almighty, instructed him to walk before me and be blameless. Then, God formally establishes his covenant. And the first major change? A new name. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the father of many nations. From exalted father, Abram, to father of a multitude, Abraham. A name promotion to match the magnitude of the promise. And Sarai, she doesn't escape divine rebranding either. As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. From my princess, a perhaps more local title, to simply princess, mother of nations. Name changes as destiny markers, a frequent device in transformation narratives. But the covenant would not be just about new names. It required a visible sign, a permanent mark on the body that would distinguish Abraham and his descendants as people of the promise. And the sign chosen was circumcision. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. A rather intimate and painful requirement to be performed on every male, descendants, and even slaves, on the 8th day of life. Whoever was not circumcised would be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Let's pause in the stillness of this night to ponder the nature of this sign, a physical, permanent mark, a constant reminder of divine commitment. Why this specific symbol? The text doesn't elaborate. It simply declares it as non-negotiable. For us, distant observers, it's a moment to reflect on how the sacred often manifests in ways that challenge modern sensitivities, written not just in books or stone, but quite literally into flesh, a visceral form of devotion, one might say. And Abraham, at 99 years old, along with Ishmael at 13, and every male in his household, was circumcised. Obedience, at that age, likely required an extra dose of courage. But the biggest revelation was still to come. God reaffirms that Sarah, now nearly 90, would bear a son. And God said to Abraham, "As for Sarah, your wife, I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her." Abraham's reaction. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" Yes, night explorers, our patriarch laughed, a laugh of disbelief, amazement, maybe even nervousness in the face of divine absurdity. And who could blame him? 100, 90, nature has its laws, and this promise seemed to stretch them beyond recognition. Abraham even offers a more pragmatic solution. Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. But God is firm. No, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, which means he laughs. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. As for Ishmael, God promises to bless him too and make him a great nation. But the core covenant, the one rooted in the original promise, would belong to Isaac, the child of laughter, of old age, of the miraculous. And if Abraham laughed outwardly, Sarah, listening quietly from the tent, couldn't hold it in either. When she hears the promise, she laughs to herself, saying, "After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being also old?" A discreet, internal laugh, born of age, exhaustion, perhaps even disbelief in divine fairy tales. But the Lord, with divine ears, apparently fine-tuned to skeptical giggles, asks Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Caught, Sarah denies it. "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. But God responds, "No, but you did laugh." A small domestic scene with profound theological undertones. The human response to the divine, impossible. The subtle doubt against the extraordinary promise. And God's insistence, yes, the impossible is coming. And so here at the Boring Testament, we're left with this image, an elderly couple marked by time and long delays, laughing, one aloud, the other in secret, at the idea that they could still bring forth the child of nations, a laugh that carries disbelief, fatigue, and perhaps the first tremor of joy at the absurdity of grace. A nighttime lesson reminding us that the most world-shaking promises sometimes arrive wrapped in the absurd and invite us to laugh, not to mock, but to marvel at the mysterious script of destiny.